I can't even say which came first, chicken or egg, but let's just say that after 1 week, I was getting sick of it. I was the workhorse. I guess it was because I was Zach, therefore the manly man, as opposed to Jen, the Setcher Queen, or Hojo, the frail scientist. Jen quit her babysitting job and refused to look for another one. I was the one who had to carry groceries to and from the house, the one who had to make the money to feed people, the one who had to fix or move furniture when it needed to be fixed or moved. My computer could rarely get online because Jen was on almost 24/7. The rest of the time she would watch me as I typed, so I could never make a journal entry that read something along the lines of, "Jen is abusing me, help God, I'm tired of this, I want out of here." But I had to be tough, and tough it out. That's my idiocy right there. But if you're noticing, I was starting to wise up. I had stopped drinking so much, which contributed to this in a large part. It made me much less tolerant of this. Jen was not supportive of me having a social life. When my phone ran out, I was not allowed to call home on my own. When I talked to people online, she would hang over my shoulder and ask who they were, when she would write down the screen name and go talk to them on her computer later. This is how she would get a hold of Melon and Meyer and God knows how many others. The only place I was really safe, and God bless it, for Katia, because she didn't like how the client worked. Yeah, I don't play that game for the graphics interface. I play it because it never failed me in keeping me sane. Jen would and did keep a very strict track of my activities. If I was going out, I had to tell her where. I did not have a house key, so I had to make sure that they were home or I'd be locked out. I was a few times anyway, because Jen would go to sleep and I would stand at the door banging and not be able to get in. I had a few fun moments like dumpster diving, and I had to keep all those secret and to myself or I'd get in trouble. And then there was the fighting, and not just silly magic fighting I talked about earlier, but real fighting. Scream fights, slapping, punching, the sound of flesh beating on flesh is not one you can miss. When I was 10, my parents went through a very rough divorce. I know these sounds, and they were bringing up bad memories and bad feelings. The apartment was small, so there was no way not to hear them. Hearing one of them wince or whimper and the beating, and the immediate after noisy, ugh. I'm not 100% sure, but I think somewhere this counts as some kind of emotional abuse. Like I said, I could not leave because I would be locked out. The apartment was on the 2nd floor, so I couldn't break in. I was not officially on the lease, so I could not ask the landlord to let me in or I risked being thrown out. I could not phone my family because Jen and Hojo would listen like hawks and try to coach me on what to say and what to think. And I could not even break down and cry because the apartment was so small they'd know what it was, and I'd have to make up some lame magical excuse so they wouldn't choke what little freedom I had. I was not getting sleep for work. Jen would wake me up at 3 a.m. to see the fairy rings, or fight some magical disturbance or whatever. My job was also cutting my hours because I was expendable summer labor, so my paycheck had dwindled. This check was all the money that was coming into the apartment. At one point, and I feel horrible to say this, but Sidian paid for an entire month's rent. Not just my third, the entire thing. I owe that person my soul. In a normal college setting, I would have easily saved the money to keep up rent. Swear, easily, even with only my paycheck. But I was also doing the food shopping. If it was up to me, we would have what most college kids do. Ramen, generic cereal, bread, water. But it was not up to me of what we got. Jen wanted steak, not just any steak, a $10 steak. And Gatorade. 2 kinds, fancy and special colored, and spices. All of this would last for 1 night of food, and my paycheck was gone. I couldn't even eat the food that was provided. The rest of the time, they demanded I ask my job for day-olds from the bakery and day-old sushi. I swiped coupons from work and used them whenever I could. I could not afford lunch, and there was no breakfast. If one of my supervisors caught me with the day-olds, I would be in trouble. The others seemed to take pity and didn't like that I was doing it. The day-olds I brought back. Jen complained because she didn't like the flavor. This was the only food coming into the house. My bank account was drained, and I was drained. I brought home a girl I met on the street who had just gone out of prison. She was a silly little acid burnout with a kitten. I was desperate for human contact. Her name, if I remember, was Hala Zacher, and she was from Washington, D.C. Hala was her name. Hala was on her way home. She was staying with a complete stranger boy. She used the last of her money to call her mom to say she was okay. Jen did not like Hala. Jen wanted Hala to leave and was mad that I brought her home for hanging out. Hala was oblivious, gloriously so, and didn't know. I wanted to stay with Hala and her kitten, who was so cute, but Hala was ordered to leave. Sid occasionally would come over. When he did, I was glad because it was somebody else. But he was, and still does, have his thickish moments. Jen would make these the be-all, end-all, and Renee would back her up. I began to think that he was like that all the time and didn't want to hang out with him when he was gone. Once he came back, they had to restart the process of brainwashing me all over again. They did have me brainwashed, and I was terrified and miserable, but I was brainwashed. I know this because Jen had a fight with Ares at one point. I don't even know what it was over. I think Ares woke up to what Jen was doing and wanted out. Jen was on about how she had been betrayed, how they were so united. About this time I began to read a few horror stories. Jen had made Ares sit in a bathtub full of ice cubes and green food coloring as a part of a Cetra training. It's a wonder the poor girl didn't get hypothermia. But Jen was up in arms. Apparently Ares called one evening when Hojo and I were at a used bookstore stealing books, and she said she wanted some of her things back that she had left at the apartment. Jen exploded. She called Hojo's cell phone in tears, screaming that she was going to kill herself. I believed it. Hojo called Sid and demanded he go over. Hojo called Ares and screamed at her. I told her off too. We rented a taxi with money we didn't have and raced home. Jen, who had been screaming, had slit her wrist while sitting in the middle of the floor. Sid was draping damp cloths on her wrist. I woke up for a second and knew that this was BS. I had a problem with self-injury, so I know very well the sight of deep cuts, and the sight was a light cut. I know well knife wounds, and Jen had obviously scratched herself horizontally on the wrists. Maybe it had been a safety pin or a butter knife, but this was not a suicide attempt. At most, it would sting. But I was still mad at Ares because I was supposed to be. I wrote her nasty emails, I joined them in bashing her. I ignored her when she came to pick her stuff up, and even though she obviously wanted to still be friends with me, I regret that now because we never reconciled. Maybe if I had gotten a clue and tried to get out with her, things would have been different. These hissy fits of Jen got more and more frequent, like fighting. She never did try to do the whole suicide thing again, though. Sometime around here, Jen wanted to move out of the apartment. The place was a pigsty. The reason was because Jen never cleaned. All the cleaning was always done by guests who they had coming and going in intervals. I did the dishes frequently, but the trash was almost never taken out. It got to the point where the apartment smelled like rotting flesh. Jen refused to believe it was the trash and it needed to go out. She kept claiming some former owner must have done something. It was a horrible mess. Their only solution as they saw it was to move out, so they got a different apartment from the landlady, a one-room gig. I didn't like this at all. At least in the current apartment, I could stay in the living room while they did whatever in the bedroom, beat each other, whatever. Now I wouldn't have anywhere to escape to. I started feeling desperate, trapped, with Jen over my shoulder whenever I wrote and checking my blog the next morning if she hadn't. I couldn't get anything out. I had not been drinking since I came here, but I was ready to start again. I could never talk to my friends, and when I could, I had to pretend everything was hunky-dory for when Jen talked to them. The few people I knew were sympathetic, but there was nothing they could help with. I couldn't go to Sid because what if he was on their side? What if he rejected me for being such a jerk? I was starting to see Ares' point, and I was getting frantic. I started to sneak out and run down to empty parking lots at night just to use the payphone to contact my dad. He was the only one who knew what was happening, really, besides Czar. Those two were briefed on the situation, and both of them were telling me it sounded bad. But because Jen would always be out on the prowl and find me, I could never tell them how bad. Just that I was stressed, I was upset, I was sick of Jen being unable to go make money because she was pregnant with some astral baby or something. Moving day. This day is pinned down in my mind. Supposedly Jen was going to help us move, and Hojo would come back to help too, and so on. I had to leave work early to help. Work was already not paying for food, and I was weak, lightheaded, and angry, but I would help. Summer was almost over only a month ago. I could make it without breaking down, I was sure. But Jen had some great disturbance in the force or something and suddenly couldn't help us move. That left yours truly because Hojo didn't even come home till 6. I packed up all their things as Jen refused to pack. She lay on the couch moping and wailing. I put everything in boxes and carried it outside. I carried it across the lawn in bare feet, up to the flight of stairs, and into the new apartment. Gas at one point helps put things on the lawn, but it was still me. I found their dildo in this, and if small children can be scarred by Tub Girl, I can be scarred by opening a clothing drawer to remove the contacts and having a sticky, purple phallus roll towards me. I can almost hear Marla Singer in my mind. Don't worry, it's not a threat to you. Jen knew I was packing that drawer and didn't even warn me, apologize, or thank me. So after 4 hours, I'm pouring in sweat. The heat of the state college this summer is so brutal, it eventually managed to damage the engine of my father's car. This was the heat I walked to work in every day, and it really was no wonder that when I got there I was nauseated, dehydrated, and in general unfit to work. No food, no sleep, no water to drink on a 20-minute walk to work in the sun will do that to you. I moved everything. I was enraged. I was getting to the end of my majestically long rope. I was finally waking up and not enough to want to leave. In the new apartment, I remember talking with an AI I had installed on my computer, MegaHal. Jen ignored me when I talked to MegaHal because it wasn't a real person. If you talk to your old Hal, you can hear it say things I said to them. Things like, I wish I could get out of here, you know? Or, you're the only one I can really talk to right now. That goes to show you how freaking cut off from people I was. We did not have the internet in the new apartment yet, so I couldn't even go to Furcadia or pretend I was happy on AIM. The shopping to fill an apartment was worse. I remember that night with nausea in my stomach, we went to Kmart, which was a long bus ride into town. I was mildly upset because Hojo suddenly had money, yet we weren't getting it for anything to eat, and I wasn't able to phone home. But I like house shopping, so I was sedated. We needed very basic things, a dish rack, some dishes, silverware, cups, a cooking pot, some dish towels. We found all of these, but then Jen saw some cabbage cloths. I don't even know what a cabbage cloth is. I assume it's a cloth wrapped cabbage or something. All I know is Jen wanted them for her cooking, so the cabbage wouldn't go bad. She has never used cabbage in cooking, 1, and 2, that's what a crisper is for, but she wanted these outrageously priced plain thin white rags. Hojo said a towel would work, and a fight erupted. Screaming fight. I can't remember the details, but there was screaming and lots of it. Jen was screaming she didn't love Hojo anymore, she was leaving her, and how dare she do this to her. Hojo screamed back that this happened every time, that she didn't need it, etc. They were both just being as bad as the people stared. Jen refused to take the bus home, and we had too many bags, and she would not carry any of them. I couldn't carry them all, so we took another taxi we couldn't afford. The poor driver was subjected to the screaming fight interspersed with the awful tension. He and I tried to chit-chat about the seashore, but they would begin to scream over us. I can almost taste the subtext of what he was saying. You poor kid, you have to go home with them.